Communication Service Tax. The CST, or the Communication Service Tax, is a tax levied on charges for the use of communication services that are provided by communication service operators. CST is imposed under Section 1 of the Communication Service Tax Act of 2008, Act 754. It is paid by consumers to the communication service providers, who in turn pay all CST collected to the Domestic Tax Revenue Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority on a monthly basis. The GRA is required under law to pay the CST collected into the Consolidated Fund. Persons liable to pay tax. That's who and who are supposed to pay this kind of tax. 1. The tax shall be paid together with the electronic communication service charge payable to the service provider by the user of the service. 2. The tax is due and payable on any supply of electronic communication service within the time period specified under subsection 5 of section 6, whether or not the person making the supply is permitted or authorized under the Electronic Communications Act 2008, Act 775, and Electronic Communications Regulations 2011, Legislative Instrument 1991, that's LI 1991, to provide electronic communication services, as amended by the Communication Service Tax Amendment Act 2013, Act 864. Rate of tax. The tax rate is 6% of the charge for the use of the communication service. Collection of the tax and payment into the Consolidated Fund. 1. The Value Added Tax Service, that's the VAT, established under section of the Value Added Tax Act 2013, Act 870, is responsible for the administration and management of the tax and shall collect and account for the tax and any interest and penalty paid under the Act. 2. Subject to Section 5, the Commissioner of the Value Added Tax shall pay the tax collected together with any interest and penalty into the Consolidated Fund. National Youth Employment Support. At least 20% of the revenue generated from this tax, as a communication service tax, shall be used to finance the National Youth Employment Program. Do you know that? Now you know. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and particularly subscribe. When you subscribe, you'll be the first to see the videos as it's posted. We are all learning. Let's learn, let's share, let's comment constructively. Now we are on submission of tax return and time for the payment of the tax. 1. Unless otherwise directed by the Commissioner in writing, a service provider shall file a tax return to account for the tax. That's as amended by the Communication Service Tax Amendment Act 2013, Act 864. 2. The tax return shall be in a form prescribed by the Minister and shall state the amount of tax payable for the period and any related matters that may be required. 3. The Commissioner may require a person to submit to the Commissioner, in addition to the tax under subsection 1, a further tax return in a prescribed form. 4. The request by the Commissioner for a further tax return may be made to a person A on that person's own behalf, or B as an agent or trustee of another person. 5. The return and the tax due for the accounting period to which the tax return relates shall be submitted and paid to the Commissioner not later than the last working day of the month, immediately after the month to which the tax return and payment relates. 6. On application in writing by a service provider, the Commissioner may extend the period within which the tax return may be submitted and payment made. where good cause is shown by the applicant. 7. The extension shall be communicated to the applicant in writing and shall state the date by which the tax return shall be submitted and the tax for the period paid. 8. A service provider who, without justification, fails to submit to the Commissioner the tax return by the date is liable to a pecuniary penalty of 2,000 Ghana cedis and a further penalty of 500 Ghana cedis for each day that the return is not submitted. Now let's see the payment of interest on outstanding tax. 1. Subject to Section 6, Subsection 6, a service provider who fails to pay the tax by the due date shall pay monthly interest on the tax due at the rate of 150% of the average of the prevailing commercial bank's rates, that's lending rates, as published by the Bank of Ghana. 2. For the purpose of subsection 1, any part of 1 month shall be deemed to be 1 month. 3. Subject to subsection 6, where the interest payable under subsection 1 is not paid within 1 month after the due date, interest shall be paid on the unpaid interest at the same rate and in same manner as interest on the unpaid tax. A tax penalty or any interest due under this act which remains unpaid after the due date may be recovered by the Commissioner as a debt. Furthermore, an amount shown as the tax on a bill or invoice for electronic communication service usage is recoverable as tax from the person who issues the bill or invoice, whether or not A. Tax is chargeable on the electronic communication services used, or B. The person who issues the bill or invoice is a person authorized to provide the electronic communication service under the Electronic Communications Act 2008 Act 775, amended by the Communication Service Tax Amendment Act 2013 Act A643, where a body, either corporate or unincorporated, which is liable for the payment of the tax or of any penalty or interest that arises under this act, defaults in payments in whole or in part after written demand, the directors, partners, and the person in control of the body are jointly and severally liable to pay the sum due. 4. Where tax, penalty, or interest is payable and due under this act, the Commissioner may apply to the court for an order that compels an individual or business A. from whom money is due or in accruing to the person required to apply for the tax, interest, or penalty, or B. who holds money for or on account of the person required to pay the tax, interest, or penalty, to pay to the Commissioner that money or so much of it as is sufficient to discharge the tax, interest, or penalty payable and due. 3. A statement or other information contained in a document produced by a computer is admissible as evidence in civil or criminal proceedings if it is certified as correct by the Commissioner unless the contrary is proved. Benefits of the CST, that is the Communication Service Tax. At least 20% of the revenue generated from the CST will be used by government to finance the National Youth Employment Program, that's the NYEP in particular, and support the national development agenda of the country in general. So by this, they get money to fund the NYEP programs so that our youth will be catered for. It must be noted that the introduction of the CST coincided with the removal of import duty, VAT, and national health insurance levy on the importation and sale of telephone sets, including mobile or cellular phones and satellite phones. This has the effect of reducing the cost of telephone sets and generally mitigating the tax burden that may result from the introduction of the CST.